Alright. Normally I end up streaming these live and do a little talking with like chat during it, but this one I'm just gonna record. I wanted to watch the Smash Invitational today too, so I'm gonna get this done before that comes on and then probably stream a little bit later. But okay, so major changes, marksman adjustments, anything major here. Tuning down adoration of shields. I saw a little bit of that before. Let's just get it champions. So at least giving at least 5 movement speed in each form, that feels kind of nice, and this is a lot of damage added to W, especially in later ranks. She normally maxes at second, so like that's like her level like 8 to 13 area where she'll feel a lot more damage out of it. 5 damage on like early clear isn't like very meaningful, but the 5 movement speed, like just to get around the map and be able to position yourself better to be able to threaten like lanes, can be meaningful. She normally falls behind in farm as the game progresses, so this might help out to that avail, because she has a harder time like insta clearing the camps compared to like a lot of the other champions when they get their damage. Because most AD champions, they have like they build enough damage early that they can just destroy the things with like a couple of good spells with ratios. But she only has the one AOE spell, and the base on it was pretty abysmal after a bunch of nerfs. So good changes. Don't think they fix Elise. They keep doing these little things to Elise because they're afraid, because like when Elise becomes good, she normally becomes really polarizing. So I think like tiptoeing like this is fine. I don't think these put her out of line, so it's a step. Ezreal's still running rampant after scaling nerves. So basically any of the 80 carries that take longer to come into the game, I think it costs like 10% more gold to get like your crit core like it used to. It was like 6,000-ish, now it's 6,600-ish, something like that. So champions that don't use those kind of items, like Kai'Sa, Ezreal, Lucian, Draven has a very liberal build path, Misfortune, Jhin, those kinds of champions are still really valuable. And the rest of the champions tend to have kind of fallen to the wayside because their builds got a little slower, and the game pacing has just kind of accelerated a lot. And that can be that was already kind of happening independent of the 80 changes, but when 80 carries get their laning phase nerfed until like level 6 plus, and supports are still strong, so you're not going to see any changes to like supports or anything like that, but that means that people are experimenting with other things. But like these kinds of champions like Ezreal, Draven, Kai'Sa, Kog'Maw's okay. Anything that doesn't build the conventional crit items can still normally like get to a power spike in a meaningful amount of time. That's either Gwynsu's or like Pen normally, or Ezreal with his unique build path. Started lowering the armor on him. This will make him a little bit more vulnerable. He's still going to be like the safest like default 80 carry that people take a lot of time. I don't think he's as good as things like Kai'Sa and Lucian and whatnot. I don't think Lucian is also really safe, but Lucian brings a lot more damage and a lot more potency early in the game, so I don't think Ezreal is actually like a huge problem or anything. So nerfing him further, I don't know how I feel about it. I would have rather seen like a quick little nerf, like tap a little bit on like Lucian or something, because I think he's more out of line than like necessarily like Ezreal is. But ultimately he is one of the stronger 80 carries in the patch, so it's not like a bad change, but I don't know if like this is like necessarily, I don't know if this is warranted or if it shouldn't have been like targeted at something else instead. So Kindred, attack speed growth increased, so she gets more attack speed at all levels. She gets 15% more attack speed base from her Q. That's actually quite a bit, because in any fight this is just 15% more attack speed, because anytime you fight with your W up, you get the buff the entire time basically. So this is in every fight she's gonna have 15% more attack speed plus another 1% per level, and then 15 base damage is actually quite a bit for like early trades. So I don't know what, I think Kindred's only a little low on like win rate right now, but these changes could like, oh, she's at like 46. These will probably bump her like 48 to 50-ish at least. Like these are pretty notable changes. My chair keeps sinking. So this also speeds up her clear quite a bit, this attack speed in particular. So her clear is okay. She can't exactly take advantage of Scuttle Crab the way some champions can, because her Scuttle is kind of slow, and Scuttle is extra value for her because everybody wants to contest it, because it gives the EXP of like a regular camp now. So it's harder for her to get her marks, which gate a lot of her power. So I I think her problems are more from like a game state and build path perspective. It's hard to have an efficient build path on her because she scales a little bit with crit. She gets lots of free attack speed. She doesn't really have on hit anymore, so she's not terribly attached to like Hurricane, like Boric style of play anymore. But you could still build that way. She wants more of like AD, and then she would want to scale crit for like ideal like burst and like damage to take advantage of the steroid she has, but crit got nerfed overall. The scuttle changes mean it's harder for her to like get her marks early in most cases, and then individually she was just fairly weak. So at least these address her individual power a little bit. Maybe she'll find it a little bit easier to contest marks, but I think she's still going to have like a really hard time because of the game state, independent of like her numbers. Her numbers would have to be silly with like the current game state and like what like how her kit's designed, because of like items and people contesting marks just naturally. Alright, Lee Sin. I've seen a lot more Lee since the last like few buffs, and I don't think Lee is too bad. Like he's normally in like he's in the normal place he is, so 2 seconds off of W at all ranks. This actually increases his sustain in the jungle pretty substantially, and 10 AoE damage up to 30 later. People are still gonna max W second because the way it scales is actually crazy, but so this is basically 10 damage early. 10 damage early is pretty alright. You could maybe put a couple points in this second to like speed up like AoE clears, but I think you would just always put points in this, especially if the cooldown on this is going down. Like this means that he's going to be able to clear the jungle, and he's going to be even healthier, like maybe like full health, like saving like a pot or something like that as he gets through. And this is a big buff to like his output later, because he has like I think his shield is 260 now, so that's 520 between the two people. So taking the cooldown off of that is basically he has like one of the largest shields in the game, and like lowering the cooldown on it can actually be really impactful for like his utility later in the game and his reliability. And ever since they've buffed his shield, I don't think he like falls off into the game as hard as like a lot of people would like to say, because he like still has like good like reliable peel. He can just click on somebody and kick them off of like allies, and then he has like such a large shield amount from it. Alright, so they keep giving Poppy buffs, and I don't think Poppy's in a bad state after the last ones. Alright, so I think Poppy is perfectly fine, and it's probably playable. And you'd probably just pick her in certain matchups. But 1 second off her Q at all ranks, and a 0.1 on her AD ratio. This is, yeah, like they're saying here, this is actually 0.2 on the AD ratio, because this is the initial hit and the trigger. So this is actually a pretty large buff, and this makes her scale really well with AD actually. If she gets 0.2 and then she also gets a second off, this could also make her jungle like a lot faster, because 1 second off plus the ratio, you could build warrior potentially early, and you normally get some AD early as a jungler anyway. Her passive is not getting any stronger early, just a little stronger later. Maybe help her in like split push scenarios to fight off against things like Fiora and Camille. I don't think this is too impactful, but this is actually a pretty big buff. I would definitely expect, like I've seen a little bit of Poppy now, I definitely expect to see more Poppy, and potentially more Poppy jungle, and maybe even like some aggressive like Poppy jungle, because her ratio on her E is pretty good if you hit somebody into a wall. The ratio on her Q is getting even better, and the cooldown is super low, so I mean, if you get CDR, you can get this Q cooldown down to what, 2.4 seconds? And 2.4 seconds on a 1.8 scaling scale is actually a lot of damage. This could end up being really hard to trade with. So I think this might bring Poppy back in a pretty decent way, and she might even see like more jungle play than she has in the past. Leaning into Rumble's lane bully strength, increasing his AP ratio 20 on his base shield at rank 1, 20 all ranks, so rank 120 on this is actually quite a bit. And then they're increasing the AP ratio on this by 0.25, that's quite a bit, and base damage by 50, 125, 200. So base damage on this going up a pretty decent amount, AP ratio going up pretty sizably too. So like normally like you're gonna have like 100 AP, let's say, for like your early equalizers, so you'll get an extra 25 damage out of that. And then you'll get an extra 10 shield out of this, plus the 20 base that they added, which will give you 30. And then he also gets the bump up from like from when he's heated but not like overheated. So these numbers aren't even accurate because these get modified up more. So when you buff like the base, then the modified number goes up too. So this is actually a very large buff for like his early trading. Like a 100 shield early is really hard to deal with. So. And Rumble historically has been really good into tanks, so the instant that Rumble becomes like playable into tanks, like I think he will be played into tanks. So Leandries, Morello's, he has a kind of awkward build path. His build path's kind of expensive to get all the things he wants to compared to what he used to. Because he used to get Leandries plus dual pen in the same item, and he loved Leandries' effect and he loved dual pen because of his incredibly high bases, but Now it takes him more investment to get like dual pen plus like the Leandri's burn plus like if he wants like Rylai's or something for like his Q. I don't think most people build Rylai's, but then he still needs like Zanya's, which is an uninspiring item, and Avoid Staff is worse than it used to be. Rabcap's better, but he has good AP ratio, so people should definitely use Rabcap on Rumble more. But if these make him able to survive laning phase reliably against tanks and like lower the risk of like him being dove, and then this is just a little bit more teamfight powered, then by all means, Rumble will see play. Rumble is historically one of the only damage champions that can survive like tank-oriented top metas because of how much he shreds and because of his guaranteed backline access with his ultimate. His ultimate is incredibly threatening to backline, and if you have something else to layer over top of it or somebody else to threaten with it, then he doesn't even have to be effective. This can win the fight. Alright, so Sejuani. So Sejuani's been a problem in competitive play for a while. She's pretty dog shit in solo queue at this point because they've nerfed her so many times, but she still sees competitive play because she's really reliable. So lowering it from 400 flat to 10 to 20% max 300, so this is just lower damage at all ranks. Oh, 300 against epic monsters, not against large monsters. Okay. So 20%, like if you do this to red buff early, this will be about 400 damage. So it'll do about the same damage you did before. And then later in the game, it'll do a little bit more damage to those things. So this will do less damage to things like Scuttle Crab, to things like Raptors, Krugs, Wolves, even Gromp early. It'll eventually do more to Gromp, red buff, and blue buff at least. But this is overall like a nerf to like the damage that that's going to do. It looks like they're instead putting the damage... Oh, they're giving her AP ratio on her. The 0.8 AP ratio is not bad. Increasing the AP ratio down here and the base damage on E. Removed. Oh, wait, this is important. Freezable targets. Enemy champions, epic, large, medium monsters, super minions, siege minions. Okay. So this doesn't have a cooldown anymore. Okay, so she's going to clear faster because she can use E literally every couple hits. Alright, so she's going to clear faster than she does now. So these are just buffs. Yeah, so these are just really big buffs to her clear speed. Because her single target is going to go through the roof with this. Wow. So early game, like red buff has like 4,000 health. So you're going to do like 200 to 400 damage to it. So you're going to get like 3 times as many triggers off. And so even if you did half the damage early with 10%, then you're still going to get 30% of the damage in the time that you would have done the 400 before, which would be like 20%. So this is actually a very large buff to like her clear speed, especially for single target. She's going to destroy single target camps. It'll take her a little longer. She's not going to like stun Scuttle Crab, smack it, and kill it from half, but she'll be able to stun the Scuttle Crab over and over, for example, or she'll be able to stun like a big camp over and over. That also decreases the damage that she takes from the camp too, because it's going to spend more time CC'd, which will increase her safety overall. And then AP ratios on these tank junglers, I really like when they add these because it gives the tank jungler an opportunity to build Runic Echoes, and if the tank jungler builds Runic Echoes, then they can invest in early game power to be more like an early aggressive jungler, or to take advantage of like an accelerated game state. So if the game is like faster than normal, you can build this AP to give yourself more power in skirmishes, and then once you have this power in skirmishes, especially since they nerfed Cinderhulk recently, and then if you're ahead of the game, then you can still afford to build tanky after that on a champion like her, and you still got the early power out of it. When you're behind, you don't want to take advantage of these normally, I don't think. Unless like you're super behind, and then I think when you're super behind you start gambling, and then having these kinds of AP ratios for when you need to gamble is good too, because if you're super behind and you're never going to get tanky because they are too far ahead of you in the state of the game, then you can just build AP and see if you can like one-shot somebody, and if you can one-shot somebody, then maybe the game doesn't feel as bad as it would otherwise. Because now you don't have to fight like a lopsided 5v5. You can like try to force into like a 5v4. Alright, so Talia, initially they removed her priority from laning by cutting her the AoE from her Q. That's the initial change. What they did after that is they made her Q single target but not have fall off damage on jungle monsters and minions. And then she was still super weak, so then they buffed her midway through the patch and made it so Roxby on the first did 60% instead of 40% to champion, so her champion damage went way up sustained. And then they buffed, this is the bigger buff, they buffed her E, the AP ratio by 0.1, that can trigger 3 times. So that's actually a 0.3 AP ratio increase, and the base damage by 15, so that's a 45 base damage increase in actuality. So this staying is the more important part, especially for jungle Talia to be able to clear jungle camps, and I think that's the part that should stay for lane Talia too, because she should be rewarded when she lands her combo, because her combo is unreliable, and most of her power should come from like when she is able to like get you into a situation where she can land her combo, and when she lands her combo, then she should be rewarded for it. More of her damage being from her Q is like, it's a lot harder to deal with her Q, especially as she levels up, because it becomes really low cooldown. She can just constantly barrage you with them, and it's hard for her to deal with you if you all in a lot of the time. But if she can harass you enough meaningfully beforehand with just throwing Qs at you, then there's not really too much to be done about it, right? At least you lose some of the opportunities to all in. So lowering her Q damage, I agree with. Leaving her E damage, I like that. She's probably going to need a slight balance tuning from here too, because I think the E is where most of the buff came from. So she's probably going to need a slight nerf still, but this will keep her in the jungle, because she's not losing any jungle damage here, and this will keep her good in mid lane after the buffs. Like, her mid lane damage to champions is actually obscenely high, especially when she gets like a lot of income. You can get Ludens and one-shot people if they're squishy. So healthy changes, I think. They'll probably need to do another small change to her. Talia's my baby, so I don't want her to be ruined, but good direction. I like leaving power into her combo, because that's the part that should be unreliable and is like, you should not get hit by most of the time. So if you do get hit by it, you should be punished for it. Taking damage out of her Q is perfectly fine. Alright, so Yorick lowering the cooldown in his Q. I think the idea here was that they're changing Sterix, and so they wanted to give him a small buff to compensate, because he's one of the most prolific users. So these were the mid-patch updates where they buffed Yasuo, they nerfed Kai'Sa, and they buffed Pyke a bunch. Pyke seems alright now, Yasuo is okay, Kai'Sa is still good, for sure. Alright, so I wanted to talk about shields, and so I like the idea of these shield changes. Some of these champions might need a little bit of compensation to, like, in exchange, but I like the idea of shields being really high impact, but being short duration, because then it rewards you more for using the shields in a good timing, rather than just covering most opportunities for the enemy to do something. So Orianna already I don't think is very good, so I think she's going to need some kind of like, she already needs like some kind of small buff, and if they're going to nerf like her ability to protect herself in lane, then I think that hurts her more than it hurts some of these others. Karma, if the shield duration, I don't know if this affects like her movement speed duration. I don't know if the movement speed duration is separate. If this affects her movement speed duration too, then this would be a really impactful nerf. I'm assuming it doesn't. But Karma's shield can be absolutely massive early, and it's super hard to trade into. Same with Lulu, same with Janus. Basically, the theme of these, they all have a little bit different thing to them. So she's keeping the damage part of it. Hers is lower range. Hers is just lower, duration. This one's just lower duration, and this one decays over time. So the idea is like, you want to put the Janus shield up right before the damage is happening, so that you can get as much of it as possible before it starts decaying and you have less shield. Whereas these ones, I mean, you can put it on and you can stop something more over time because it's not going to decay, but it does, like, it's up for less time. So you have to be more cognizant of when you're pressing the buttons, and I like those changes from like a balance perspective, because you should have to use decision making to use the buttons. Okay, so you should be shielding when you're trading. You shouldn't just be shielding to deny them the ability to trade, right? So I like these changes overall. Orianna in particular might need a buff for this. This is a big nerf to shield duration for Lulu, and I don't think Lulu's in that crazy of a spot, so Lulu might need a small buff. Karma might need a buff for like solo queue. Her competitive play is fine. I don't know how they can target mostly solo queue on Karma off the top of my head. I'll have to think about that more. And Janet's just been broken in solo queue forever, so I don't mind if she gets a small nerf. And then nerfing the cooldown reduction and heal shield power on this. Alright, so these are just nerfs to all enchanter items basically. Tanks build these two. Athene's Unholy Grail getting buffed. Alright, so you can make back some of this like power through like Athene's Unholy Grail. Athene's Unholy Grail is actually really good. So when you do damage with any champion, what happens is it takes a quarter of the damage that it could do in theory, like before it got stopped in any capacity, and that's what gets converted from Athene's Unholy Grail. So instead of a fourth now, it's going to do a little over a third. And so that's actually like quite a bit more for like stacking up Athenes and being able to trigger it on other people. This should become much more valuable on a lot of champions because they're going to stack it up so much faster. So that means like you could potentially use 2 abilities on Sona, and then your next W like always does that. Or if you hit 2 targets with your Q, you might actually just fully trigger this. You might like, and then you just have an extra heal, and so this could actually be like a very potent buff. I think these changes are overall healthy because enchanters have been kind of toxic to like solo queue in for quite some time, and the uninteractive playstyle that they offer, where they just kind of give you their AD carry stats so the AD carry can stat check you, and there's not either you meet the quota or you don't. It has always felt kind of unfun to play against. Removing banner, so this is goodbye for the foreseeable future and would need serious work to make a return. Alright, so this is interesting because in the past, banner was always so worthless and nobody ever wanted to buy it. And then they tried this season to make it such a good item to buy by giving it like different things, like either you have to have physical champions that can deal with it, and so that gates your ability to play like double magic, or it just takes so much less damage that it pulls a crazy amount of pressure on all the parts of the map for free, and then it gives you the money during the process, and it's not even like a bad selfish item. If they wanted to keep banner in the strong state it was, then what I would like to see is that you give up more individual power for the power of actives. So what I would like to see is if you invest into banner, then banner should be super powerful. Like it could even be in just its current state, 40% like damage reduction. Like I don't think that one's too crazy to deal with. It's still annoying. It's not too crazy to deal with. It's still good, but then it shouldn't give nearly as many selfish stats. So when you want the active, you're paying for the active. You're not paying for like, well, this is really good base stats and then I get a good active on top of it. You're paying for banner, right? You want the banner because banner either like punishes like their composition, or it makes it easier for you guys to set up like macro players, or to go to an opposite side of the map or something. So I think I would love to see that change in general. Like, if Athene's is going to be really good, I would love if this was even higher than 35%, but the base item was worse. I'd love if the active for redemption was better, but the item was worse. I'd love if the trigger for censor was better, but the item just baseline was just fucking dog shit. Like, those are the kinds of changes that I'd like. Or if Mikhail's still had like a crazy amount of healing on it, but it just gave you almost no stats baseline, so you bought it purely like for the active. And I think that would go a long way toward like your decision making for an item. Like the item would feel really impactful when you use it right, and the item would and it would feel bad if you used it wrong, obviously. But you would buy the item for the item, not because like it has the stats you want, and then you just get something along the way, which is what a lot of times it feels like you're doing. So Sterix Gauge designed as a juggernaut item. So let's just look at change. Grants 50% of base damage as additional base damage instead of bonus. So basically, the people that build Sterix right now are champions that build Trinity Force. That's basically it. You basically build Sterix if you build Trinity Force, and this is because it adds base damage, and the only thing that base damage affects on most champions is Trinity Force, unless the champion has an overall AD ratio. Most champions have bonus AD ratios, so changing it to bonus attack damage will increase most champions' damage when they buy Sterix now, because their 50% base damage will be turned into bonus damage, and since it's not base damage, then it will buff like their skills. So if I look at like, I think like Rek'Sai or something that like I play, I think Rek'Sai's Q is bonus damage. Let me make sure I'm not being inaccurate here. Rek'Sai's Q is bonus damage, Rek'Sai's W is bonus damage, Rek'Sai's E is bonus damage, Rek'Sai's R is bonus damage. So everything that Rek'Sai does is bonus damage. So previously, Rek'Sai would get extremely little out of Sterix Gauge, because Rek'Sai would get like 30 AD out of it, and that 30 AD would not multiply the damage of any of her spells. Whereas now, that 30 AD will give her 30 damage on all of her spells, and that's a very... So this will be bought by a wider range of champions, and it's less tied to Trinity Force. It doesn't have any special synergy with Trinity Force anymore, except for the fact that if you're buying Trinity Force, it's normally on a champion that has a good base attack damage, and so since this scales out base attack damage, it might still be good with you, but it's not like mandatory for Trinity Force users anymore, which will feel pretty good. So this will see more use by bruisers and fighters. Let's say like most junglers that build like warriors into like Cleaver or something, now they can probably build Sterix and be a little happier about it than they were previously. Or if you go Cinder Hulk into Cleaver, then you can build Sterix too, because the proc scales off your health. So all those seem like fine changes. I like when an item gets opened up and is less like... It should still have really good use cases, but it shouldn't have like, well, these are the only cases, right? Because like there's like a lack of like AD health items. There's Hydra for melee wave clear, and there's Cleaver for CDR and like Shred, but it's not that efficient of an item. So like then that's really all you can get for like a generalist like AD health item. So Sterix can now fill that niche a little bit. They could also just add another item and then keep something in for Trinity Force, but I think like the abuse cases are like they're literally in some cases like some of Camille's power, some of Fiora's power, some of Gangplank's power fighting like duels, some of Yorick's power is literally just because like Trinity Force is so good. Trinity Force Sterix is so good on them that they just do like obscene amounts of damage with it, and it makes them really hard to duel or all in because of the trigger plus the amount of base damage they get. Okay, so this is just a bug fix, I guess. So Celerity, I think this is overall a buff for Celerity. So less people will passively take Celerity because it just gives 3% movement speed. So now it gives 1.5, so you're going to get a little bit less movement speed out of it. So let's say you got like 10 movement speed out of it before, now you'll get 5. But for that 5 movement speed, you'll still get the same amount of damage. So basically, if you only got 5 movement speed out of it, you're basically going to get 0 damage out of it anyway. But now, for any champion that has movement speed, this is just a massive buff. So like, let's say I'm Skarner and I can press my Predator plus W and I get a 600 movement speed boost. No, it's not going to be 600. Like, we'll do Righteous Blue Ray too. And let's say you actually gain like 500 movement speed. So if you gain 500 movement speed, that means when you first trigger with somebody, then you're going to gain 50 attack damage for your first hit on them. And Predator has like a massive AD ratio. So this is actually like a very large buff to things like Hecarim, like Skarner, like Master Yi can take it. I normally end up taking this on basically every jungler. Nidalee can run around really fast, and that would be a good buff for her damage. What else are junglers? Olaf will love this. He'll get a lot of damage, and he actually scales really well with the attack damage because he gets so much attack speed and because his Q and E scale well. Talia will like this because she runs really fast along walls, so if you're on the wall and you like combo, then you can get the damage, which will calculate from when you enter combat, which is when you hit them. So there's a lot of champions that are going to make great use out of this. There's also a lot of laners that are going to make great use out of this. Basically, if your champion has any kind of movement speed buff in the slightest now, or you build like movement speed items, you'll just take Celerity now. Previously, you just took Celerity because you needed like filler and you wanted like a little bit of movement speed. But now, if you have any kind of synergy in the slightest, or you build any items for it, then you'll take it for sure. And then you might even still take it like sometimes just like passively. Like 1.5% isn't a lot, but sometimes there's not better options. Then Halo Blades being buffed by 25% at all ranks. 75% at rank 1 is actually pretty crazy. I think this actually does have like use cases like Xin Zhao, or maybe even like Rek'Sai or something like that. I think if it gets buffed a little bit, I think Phase Rush is really good in Xin Zhao, so he can chase somebody down with his sustained damage. But I want this to be an item that like Xin Zhao and Quinn and like champions that get onto you and they want to get the job done, or they want to get a certain trigger or proc immediately, can get it done easily. So like if Quinn comes onto you and she gets a Harrier trigger, and then she can immediately auto you again after the, because I think Harrier gives like an auto reset, and then you E, and then you get another Harrier trigger, and you can get that all off super fast, like way faster than you would otherwise, because you have so much bonus attack speed. Then I think like that's like a healthy place for the item to be, because then it would have like synergies with like certain champions that can really take advantage of it. So I want it to be used on champions like her, champions like Xin, maybe champions like Rek'Sai, so Rek'Sai can get all of her autos in, so she can get 100 Fury bite in before like the person can really get away. Maybe somebody like Kindred, so that Kindred can get her 3 hits for her E as fast as possible. I kind of like the Halo Blades on Kindred before. I don't think it's as good as Press the Attack, honestly, but it felt alright. So with these buffs, it might feel pretty damn competitive on Kindred, especially with the other attack speed buffs she got. And between Halo Blades plus the attack speed buffs she got, maybe she can go like a more on-hit oriented route, even though she doesn't have a lot of support for it in her kit baseline. Maybe that's just what she can do. So I'd like to see this bump to a place where I think it would mostly be used on assassins, junglers, that kind of thing. It's never going to be used on like AD carries because it locks itself out. But I'd like to see it like have a place for those kinds of champions. So anything else down here? Those are all emote changes. Looks like that's it. Alright, so the quick recap. I don't know if this Ezreal nerf is necessary. I don't think this fixes Elise, but it's a step in the right direction, and that's fine. Elise is very polarizing, so I understand the tentativeness. Kindred buffs to her, I like playing Kindred, but selfishly aside, like, I don't think these fix like the core problem she has of like the difficulty of her contesting scuttles early, or the how awkward her build path is, especially when she has like special scaling with crit, but crit's really awkward for her to build. And then Lee buffs, I thought he was in an okay place. 10 damage to his AoE early, and to his even to like his ganking is like whatever. This is the more important buff. This will make him much more sustainable in the jungle. It increases his ability to move around. It gives him potential, like this cooldown gets halved when you do it to a champion later. So, I mean, if you do it to any champion or to yourself. So this is a 6-second cooldown with a 520 shield, so that's pretty massive. And so I think these will probably bring Lee into a really reliable spot for solo queue, and he'll probably start seeing like fringe competitive play again. Depending on what people want from like a composition, but like because he doesn't really offer a lot to a composition that like for like closing a game or to diversify composition. Like if you wanted like another damage threat, like he can be that early, but he doesn't come into that role late. He doesn't turn into like a very disruptive tank later. He can peel a little bit. I think that's like his best use case later in the game is peeling for a stronger backline, after enabling them to get ahead with his potency and skirmishes early. I think these will make him pretty good. Poppy, these changes could target her more in the jungle, particularly this one, where like the AD ratio, because she doesn't build much AD in top lane, but she might build like cleaver. Even if she does build cleaver, then this is like a big buff to her damage and like cleaver trades, because an extra 0.2 attack damage is an extra like 10 damage on every hit. So, and the cooldown going down to 4 seconds. It's a very low cooldown for like how high damage her Q is. So this will make her jungle clear faster. This will make her trades in lane a little bit better. This makes her wave clear better in lane too. But I think these would be felt more in the jungle, and we might start to see more Poppy jungle. But they're healthy changes overall. I hope Rumble can break out of the tank bruiser juggernaut fighter. Not really many fighters. Top meta and take over the world, because he's normally one that can contest tanks, and he has unrivaled like backline access that a lot of champions struggle with. So if a champion like Ezreal or Lucian or Caitlyn is ever like really hard to deal with, then Rumble can threaten them without ever putting himself into meaningful risk, while also doing high damage to like the front line too. So Rumble can be incredibly powerful, especially around like objectives, like where you force them through like certain routes or whatnot. So I like seeing Rumble in games, actually. Sejuani, they're buffing her single target a ton and giving her an alternative build path where she can maybe build Runic Echoes to be more aggressive early. Giving her 1.1 total more AP ratio means that if you build Runic Echoes, you'll do over 100 more damage on your combo than you would have previously. And that's if you were to build Runic Echoes now, because I think her Q already has like an AP ratio on it. So that kind of thing can actually make her like a lot more potent in like a skirmish. I know her ult has like a good AP ratio on it. So these kinds of changes, I always welcome these little changes, because they're probably not going to mean that people are not building her like a tank, but they give her an alternative playstyle if you're really far ahead and you want to be able to snowball, or if you're really far behind and you want to be able to like one-shot somebody because you're not going to be tanky regardless. And I think that like those are fine changes for both. Increasing the base damage on this is also meaningful. You do max it second. I wonder what this means, that she can now do medium monsters too. I don't know what medium monsters are. So Talia, nerfing her Q damage is fine. I like the E. I like keeping the E damage. I think her combo should be where most of her damage comes from. Yorick is being compensated for Sterix. Shield changes, those are good changes for the game. Lulu, Orianna, and Karma might need compensation buffs. I don't think Janna will. Athene's looks really good after that change. Banner, I'd love to see come back at some point, but be like you buy it for Banner, not for the other reasons. And then Sterix is going to become a more generalist item. And then Hill of Blades, I'd like to see this buff to a point where it can be playable. It might just need to like, the cooldown doesn't like fully trigger when you like hit minions or something like that, if we wanted to see more use out of it. So, because right now it can only really be used on like junglers or champions that aren't going to interact with people very often, so they can get the buff. So that's unfortunate. Celerity looks like it's better on every champion in the game that has any kind of movement speed in the slightest, and is not that much worse than like other champions too. It might not get taken as generally by champions that just need to click a button in sorcery and want like Gathering Storm as their secondary, which is what like a lot of AD carries ended up doing. But for a lot of champions, this is just a massive buff. Like a lot of junglers, a lot of mid laners, like Echo will love this. He gets so much movement speed to finish people with. Master Yi will love this. Olaf, Trundle, Skarner, who else is a champion that loves movement speed? Draven in bot lane with his W plus any Trinity Force user could potentially use it. Fiora gets a lot of movement speed. She'll love Celerity too for a lot of attack damage. Gives her more true damage. So this looks really good. Probably better overall. Don't if they were trying to nerf it, like they're carving out a deeper identity for it. I like the idea, but I think like they didn't need to go like full double with it. So, yep, that's the patch. I like most of the changes in it. I like the shield changes. I think the Talia changes are fine. And I like the direction with like Elise and like Kindred. I don't know about Lee. Ezreal's probably over nerfed, poor bastard. But we'll have to see because the meta is really wonky right now, and I'd love to see like some of that addressed, like some of the abuse cases, like Master Yi Taric. Like it has proven to be very dominant and it's popular in both competitive play from the fringe bit we've seen, plus solo queue, while being extremely successful. So some of those strategies seem a little bit too reliable when I think they should be strategies that are like competitive, but they shouldn't be as reliable as they are. So thanks for watching, and I hope this is insightful to some of you guys. And there weren't a ton of changes on this patch, but talk a lot about what I think is like healthier, like what I'd like to see for like a direction. So thanks. Appreciate anybody that stops in, and have a great day.